Let's continue reading the little booklet by Theophil Christen called The Alternative to Capitalism and Socialism. Page 32, Social Justice. With the economic development resulting from freed land and freed money, as described in the foregoing pages, the dreams of the most daring socialists are realized, without the nationalization of production. Exploitation of the workers is at an end when wages rise, interest falls, and general prices remain constant, that is, when there is no increase in the cost of living. Provided, of course, that rents are expended in the interest of all, as explained in section 8 of this little booklet. It must be admitted that as long as only one country adopts freed money, the rate of interest does not fall to zero. Within the country, thanks to the economic stability, no risk of crisis, no loss of purchasing power in money, the rate of interest will be materially lower than elsewhere. It must be admitted that as long as only one country adopts freed money, the rate of interest does not fall to zero. Within the country, thanks to the economic stability, the rate of interest will be materially lower than elsewhere. But the greater the difference, the greater the export of capital. This is no disadvantage to the free economic country, for it only means that part of the burden of interest is paid by foreigners. The rate of interest in the free economic country will of course fall more slowly and will remain permanently above zero. Capitalistic exploitation will not entirely disappear, but the first country that adopts free economy will gain economic strength so rapidly that the other countries will be compelled to bring their economic systems into line. The greater the number of countries adopting free economy, the greater the fall in the rate of interest, and the more complete the disappearance of capitalistic exploitation. Free economy preserves what is valuable in capitalism: the division of labor, free competition, private enterprise, and production on a large scale, but eliminates the unjust and economically unsound part of capitalism, namely unearned income in the form of rent and interest. Except money and land, and possibly a few other monopolies, such as public utilities, nothing is nationalized. All other enterprises are subject to free competition. Such an economic system eliminates all privileges. Success depends solely on personal effort and ability, to the great advantage of the individual and of the race. Free economy reduces the dangerous and increasing bureaucratic power of the state. Unearned income causes class bitterness and international friction, and by an abuse of state power, legislation is passed for its protection. Other legislation is designed to conciliate the opponents of unearned income. It is a remarkable fact that the modern state, though in theory opposed to socialism, has in practice adopted plank after plank of the socialistic platform of nationalization. The modern state infringes more and more on the rights of the individual, controlling a large part of his income through taxation and determining a large part of his daily activity. Remember that this was written way before the experience we are having right now. The total income of all the people in USA increased from $44,400,000,000 in 1933 to $49,400,000,000 in 1934, a gain of 11%. In the same period, federal taxes increased 20%. The total tax bill, including federal, state, and local taxes, equaled 1/3 of the annual income, or 33 cents out of every dollar. And still the budget is not balanced, and the government is continuing to borrow money to pay 1/2 of its bills. The federal deficit for the fiscal year 1935 to 1936 is more than $3,280,000,000. Thus, the American has covered 1/3 of the road to communism, and is well on the way nearer to it, however much he abhors it. In England, the national income is $3,900 million, and the parliamentary budget in 1928 was $834 million. With local taxation added, public expenditure in England absorbs more than 1/4 of the national income. The individual Englishman has surrendered control over more than 1/4 of his income to the state. Economically speaking, he is 25% a communist. With free economy, unearned income and the legislation designed to protect it disappear. The inefficient principle of nationalization is replaced by the natural principle of private initiative. The state ceases to be an autocrat and becomes the useful servant of the public. Owing to the disappearance of rent and interest under free economy, and to the resulting increased taxability of the population, all national and international debts could easily be repaid within less than a generation. Besides relieving the taxpayer, this would also greatly simplify the machinery of the state. It is evident that under an economic system free from interest, the provision for old age and sickness will not be made from interest on savings, but by using up the savings themselves, generally in the form of a life annuity. It is evident that under an economic system free from interest, the provision for old age and sickness will not be made from interest on savings, but by using up the savings themselves, generally in the form of a life annuity. The case of invalids who are unable to work and who live from interest is often quoted by upholders of capitalism, but the number of invalids so well provided for is small, and their share in the total interest is negligible. Nor should the great increase under free economy of the means of provision for invalids be forgotten. The very great majority of workers will only be capable of effective saving under free economy. The very great majority of workers will only become capable of effective saving under free economy. The sum they can save at present is so small that the interest they receive is trifling compared with the annuities they will enjoy in old age as the result of their savings under free economy. The foregoing is a mere outline of the beneficial developments that will follow the introduction of freed land and freed money, but enough has been said to prove the great practical importance of economic and monetary questions. The study of these questions shows us how humanity can be set free from the age-long oppression of rent and interest. This is the end of the little booklet which Theophil wrote. But in this booklet is included an appendix, Gazelle's Reform, Free Economy, compared with the work of other economists, by Philip Pye, who is the translator. As further proof of the scientific truth and practicability of free economy, we shall add to the foregoing clear and simple explanation by the late Dr. Christen A short comparison of Gazelle's great reform with the work of other economists in the same field. The aim of free economy is firstly to stabilize the purchasing power of money, and secondly to abolish unearned income in its two forms, interest and rent. The stabilization of money was urgently necessary, even with the so-called normal conditions before the war. At that time, the gold standard had been almost universally adopted, with the result that the purchasing power of money continually fluctuated, for it depended on the supply of and the demand for gold. If we turn to Sauerbeck's statistics of prices in England during the last century, we see, for example, that in the 5 years 1849 to 1854, prices rose 24%, owing to the Californian gold discoveries, while the South African gold discoveries caused an annual rise of prices of 2.2% during the whole period from 1896 to 1912. If we turn to Sauerbeck's statistics of prices in England during the last century, we see, for example, that in the 5 years 1849 to 1854, prices rose 24%, owing to the Californian gold discoveries, while the South African gold discoveries caused an annual rise of prices 2.2% during the whole period from 1896 to 1912. Such great rises of gold prices no doubt stimulated production, but at the same time they disturbed the whole structure of economic life, injuring creditors, annuitants, bondholders, and everyone in receipt of a fixed income, causing suffering and discontent among wage earners, and concentrating wealth in the hands of the trading and speculating class. In short, the same evils that all countries have experienced in still greater intensity through the rising prices caused by excessive issues of paper money during and after the war. And when the production findings of gold was insufficient, prices fell with still more disastrous results. The falling prices injured the debtor class, which is the most active and important element in economic life, including, as it does, employers, merchants, and farmers. A sharp fall of prices caused an acute commercial crisis, bankruptcies of manufacturers and merchants, unemployment. In the years 1824, 1836, 1839, 1846, 1857, 1866, 1873, 1878, 1890, and 1893. A gradual fall of prices caused trade depression and lasting unemployment, a recent example being the fall of prices of nearly 50% between 1873 and 1896, which caused the notorious chronic crisis of that period, and a complete stagnation of commerce. 40 of the last 80 years of the 19th century were marked by general trade depression due to falling prices. The connection between falling prices and trade depression or crisis is a cardinal point of monetary theory. The connection between falling prices and trade depression or crisis is a cardinal point of monetary theory. The connection was known to Hume, to many of the English economists at the beginning of the 19th century, William Jacobs, Sir Archibald Alison, to the bimetallists, Levallier, to Marshall, Contemporary Review, 1887, Walker, Money, page 129, and J.S. Nicholson, Monetary Problems, page 61. It is one of the curiosities and tragedies of the history of economics that this fundamental economic truth was ignored or forgotten at the beginning of the 20th century. Statesmen, bankers, and economists, except Gesell and his school, Arthur Kitson, Irving Fisher, and a few others, were unanimously in favor of deflation, falling prices after the war. Examples of the disastrous results of falling prices due to currency mismanagement are only too plentiful during the last few years. The post-war world crisis began in March 1920. I am reading this now. We are in 2020. The post-war world crisis began in March 1920 in Japan, when the Japanese government forced a deflationary policy on the banks. Paper money was withdrawn from circulation, with the result that prices fell 40% within a year, and Japan experienced the severest commercial crisis in her history. The example of Japan was followed by the Central Monetary Authority of the United States, the Federal Reserve Board, in the summer of 1920, and the resulting fall of prices of 46% within a year threw 7 million American workers out of employment. The policy of deflation was then reversed, with the result that unemployment disappeared. In England, a more gradual deflationary policy has been obstinately persisted in by the English government and the Bank of England. English prices have in consequence fallen over 50% from 1920 to 1929. We'll continue this in the next reading.